Redundant paperwork. That's what Trent called my compliance files. He fired me in front of 50 witnesses, smirking as security escorted me out. What he didn't know. Every license, every certification, every legal clearance that kept this company running was registered under one name. Mine. And I just walked out the door with the keys to their entire operation. Welcome to Revenge with Precious, where we share real stories of betrayal, resilience, and the courage to stand up for yourself. These are tales of people who refused to stay silent, who drew boundaries when love turned toxic, and who chose their peace over family obligation. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, these stories are for you. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that might change how you see your own life. Please, watch till the end. Let's get started. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. I stood near the back wall while Trent Bush, our newly minted operations manager, pointed at the overhead screen like a televangelist selling salvation. His slide deck read Operational Excellence through Elimination. The elimination part, I'd learn in about 90 seconds, meant me. 50 employees packed the room, most clutching tablets, a few whispering. Trent's voice boomed over the murmur. Last quarter's delivery delays cost us credibility, he announced, his eyes scanning the crowd before landing on me. And certain departments prioritized paperwork over performance. My badge vibrated once against my hip. Then twice. I glanced down. Access denied flashed red on the tiny screen. Someone had remotely deactivated my credentials during the meeting. The room noticed. Heads turned. Trent smiled, thin and satisfied. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. I checked one thing before walking into this room, and that one thing would unravel everything he thought he controlled. Ruth, Trent said louder now, maybe you'd like to explain why compliance slowed down our biggest shipment last month? I met his gaze, calm as winter. I can explain, I said quietly, but you won't like the answer. My name is Ruth Judge, and for 12 years I made sure Trident Logistics didn't collapse under the weight of its own ambition. Not glamorous work. No corner office, no executive parking spot. Just certifications, renewals, vendor audits, and the endless bureaucratic architecture that keeps 18-wheelers legally rolling across state lines. I wasn't the loudest voice in strategy meetings. I was the one who made sure we could have those meetings at all. Every fleet vehicle required specific licensing. Every contracted vendor needed updated insurance certificates. Every client agreement included compliance clauses that, if violated, triggered penalties steep enough to bankrupt smaller firms. I managed all of it. Quietly. Efficiently. Invisibly. Until Trent arrived 6 months ago with his MBA from some school that probably had a climbing wall in the student union and his belief that disruption solved everything. He took one look at my department and saw fat to trim. Red tape to burn. Legacy systems to streamline. What he didn't see was the architecture. The certifications weren't just files in a database. They were legal agreements tied to a registered compliance officer. That officer's signature carried authority. Without it, vendors couldn't process orders. Clients couldn't accept shipments. Regulators couldn't approve renewals. And that signature? It was mine. Trent's reorganization hit like a flash flood. Departments merged. Roles consolidated. People who'd worked together for years suddenly reported to strangers. He called it operational synergy. I called it chaos with a PowerPoint template. The first warning sign came during a finance review. I noticed 3 vendor contracts approaching expiration. Critical ones. Suppliers who provided specialized freight insurance and hazmat clearances. I flagged them in the system, sent emails marked urgent, and scheduled a meeting with Trent. He showed up late, scrolling through his phone. Ruth, right? He said, not looking up. These renewals can wait. We're focused on delivery metrics right now. I slid the printed contract across the table. These don't wait. If they lapse, our fleet loses legal clearance in 4 states. That includes the route for our biggest client. He glanced at the paper, shrugged. If it's not in the delivery pipeline, it's not my problem. I stared at him, measuring the gap between confidence and competence. It will be, I said. He laughed. Actually laughed. That's the kind of thinking we're moving away from, Ruth. Less fear, more action. I didn't argue. I just printed another copy of that contract, dated it, signed it, and filed it in a folder I kept at home labeled receipts. 2 weeks later, I sent an email to Trent and copied HR. Subject line, urgent, certification expiry notice. The body outlined 3 contracts set to expire within 30 days, the regulatory consequences of non-renewal, and the specific vendors who'd halt service if we didn't act. I attached renewal forms, contact information, and a step-by-step process for authorization. A junior analyst in operations flagged it as low priority. Trent never opened it. I knew because the system showed red receipts, and his name stayed grayed out for 5 days. On day 6, I printed the email. Signed it. Dated it. Added it to my folder. Then I stopped chasing him. If he wanted to ignore the foundation holding up his shiny new operational model, that was his choice. I documented mine. Some lessons can't be taught. They have to be survived. And I'd been in logistics long enough to know that survival always left a paper trail. Trent thought compliance was bureaucracy. I knew it was a safety net. He was about to learn the difference between the two by falling through the space where that net used to be. The operational huddle happened every Tuesday at 9. Trent stood at the front of the glass-walled conference room, animated, energized, pointing at a dashboard that tracked delivery times, fuel efficiency, and cost per mile. He loved that dashboard. Lived for it. His team, a mix of analysts barely old enough to rent cars, nodded along like disciples. I sat in the back, laptop open, watching my own dashboard. The compliance one. The one nobody else ever looked at. Yellow indicators were starting to appear. Warnings. Missed deadlines. Contracts drifting toward expiration. Trent was mid-sentence, something about cutting the fat from legacy processes, when I raised my hand. He paused, visibly annoyed. Yes, Ruth. That dashboard doesn't include compliance delays, I said evenly. You're measuring speed without accounting for the stops required by law. Silence. Then laughter. One of the analysts, a kid named Bryce who wore sneakers to client meetings, smirked. Maybe that's why you're not in operations, Ruth. Others joined in. Polite chuckles. Trent didn't stop them. He just smiled, shrugged, and said, "We're focused on outcomes, not obstacles." I closed my laptop. Maybe. Then I stood and walked out. Behind me, I heard Bryce whisper, "She's so out of touch." I didn't correct him. Time would do that for me. 3 days later, HR sent a calendar invite. Subject, reassessment interview. I knew what that meant. Corporate code for "we're phasing you out but need documentation to avoid a lawsuit." The HR rep, a woman named Vanessa with a voice like a customer service recording, sat across from me in a small windowless room. She read from a script, eyes glued to the paper. "This is a standard organizational review. We're evaluating all roles to ensure alignment with current operational goals." I let her finish. "And my role?" Vanessa hesitated. "Your position is being reclassified. We're exploring options for reassignment." Reassignment. Not retention. I leaned back. "Who's taking over my certifications?" She blinked. "Certifications." The compliance authority tied to every vendor contract, every fleet license, every client agreement. Who's assuming that responsibility? Vanessa looked down at her notes, flipping pages. I'll need to check with operations. You should, I said, standing. Because that authority isn't tied to a job title. It's tied to a registered officer. Make sure the transfer is handled correctly, or you'll have a legal problem bigger than a restructuring. She smiled nervously. I'm sure it's all handled. I didn't smile back. I'm sure it's not. That night, I stayed late. The office was empty, fluorescent lights humming overhead like a swarm of mechanical bees. I plugged in my encrypted drive and opened the master compliance directory. Every certificate, every renewal, every vendor authorization, every regulatory filing. All of it cataloged, time-stamped, and backed up. I exported the full archive, encrypted the file, and saved it to 3 separate locations. Cloud storage, external drive, a second backup stored off-site. Then I opened the Certification Authority Registry, the legal database that tracked who held signing power for logistics compliance in our region. One name appeared next to Trident Logistics. Ruth Judge, Primary Compliance Officer, Registered Authority since 2014. I stared at that entry for a long time. Trent thought he could delete my job and everything would keep running. He didn't understand that compliance wasn't a department. It was a legal designation. And that designation was mine. I closed the laptop, unplugged the drive, and locked it in my desk drawer. Then I went home, poured a glass of wine, and waited. The announcement hit the company Slack channel at 8:30 the next morning. New organizational structure, effective immediately. My name was listed under reclassified positions. Trent's name appeared at the top of the operations flowchart. He posted a message 20 minutes later, congratulating the team on embracing lean efficiency and eliminating redundancies. I read it twice. Then I logged the timestamp, took a screenshot, and printed a hard copy. Signed it. Dated it. Filed it with the others. By noon, my access to internal systems had been restricted. Email still worked, but I couldn't update vendor files or access certification dashboards. HR sent a form letter thanking me for my service and outlining the transition timeline. No severance. No exit interview. Just a polite corporate goodbye wrapped in legal jargon. I cleared my desk slowly, methodically. A framed photo of my father. A coffee mug from a vendor conference. A stress ball shaped like a tiny truck. My one ally, a fleet technician named Cal George, stopped by. He looked uncomfortable. You don't deserve this, Ruth. I smiled. No one ever does. He frowned. What happens now? I handed him a sticky note. Keep an eye on the fleet dashboard tomorrow morning. He stared at the note. Why? You'll see. 48 hours later, the first red light appeared. Fleet system alert, license verification failed. It started with one vendor portal. A hazmat insurance provider. Their automated system pinged Trident's compliance database, requesting reauthorization for the quarterly renewal. The system tried to process it. Failed. Tried again. Failed. Then locked. The vendor's protocol was clear. No verified compliance officer signature, no service. By 10:30, a second portal locked. Then a third. Trent stormed into IT, face flushed, voice sharp. Who changed the permissions? The IT lead, a guy named Foster who'd been there longer than anyone, pulled up the system logs. No one changed anything. The system's rejecting access because the registered compliance officer isn't in the authorization chain anymore. Trent blinked. So add someone else. Foster shook his head. It's not a permissions issue. It's a legal registry issue. The certifications are tied to a specific officer. Ruth Judge. Her signature is hard-coded into every vendor agreement. Trent stared at the screen. Cal, Standing nearby, noticed something. A faint digital watermark on the frozen portal. R. Judge, Compliance Authority. Trent's jaw tightened. Fix it. Foster looked at him like he'd just asked him to fix gravity. I can't. This isn't IT. This is federal compliance law. By noon, the panic spread. Calls flooded in from vendors. Automated emails triggered breach clauses. One of our biggest clients, a national retailer, sent a terse message. All shipments suspended until compliance certifications verified per contract Section 12. Trent's name was on every affected agreement. His reforms. His timelines. His responsibility. Legal got involved. The general counsel, a sharp woman named Patrice, pulled up the contract Ruth had tried to show Trent weeks earlier. She read it aloud in the emergency meeting. All certifications and renewals are non-delegable and must be executed by the registered compliance officer on record with the Regional Transportation Authority. She looked up. That's Ruth Judge. No one else is authorized. Trent's face went pale. So we just reauthorize it. Patrice shook her head. You can't reauthorize what you never had authority over. You're not the signer. You never were. Someone asked the obvious question. Can we get Ruth back? Trent didn't answer. He just stared at the table, jaw clenched, realizing he'd fired the one person who held the keys to the entire system. And she was gone. The CEO called an emergency all-hands meeting. Virtual. Company-wide. His face filled the screen, tight with controlled fury. I want to know, he said, voice low and dangerous, who allowed our compliance infrastructure to collapse. Silence. Trent tried to speak, stumbling through jargon about transition gaps and unforeseen vendor protocols. The CEO cut him off. Unforeseen? We had a compliance officer for 12 years. Where is she now? More silence. Someone in the chat typed, Ruth Judge was terminated last week. The CEO's eyes widened. Terminated. His voice cracked. Who authorized that? HR scrambled. Operations pointed fingers. Trent's name surfaced again and again in the documentation. Every meeting. Every email. Every ignored warning. The CEO slammed his laptop shut. The screen went black. The meeting ended. 30 seconds later, Trent received a private message from the CEO. One line. My office. Now. I was at home when Cal called. They're desperate, he said. Trent's trying to reach you. I sipped my coffee, looking out the window. I'm sure he is. Ruth, it's bad. Vendors are locked out. Clients are threatening breach penalties. The whole system's frozen. That's what happens, I said calmly, when you delete the system's only authorized gatekeeper. Cal was quiet for a moment. Are you going to help them? I thought about Trent's smirk. The laughter in that conference room. The badge deactivation mid-meeting. Help them. I repeated. Cal, I tried to help them. I sent emails. I scheduled meetings. I warned them. They called it redundant paperwork. He sighed. What should I tell them? Tell them, I said, to read the contracts they ignored. Internal counsel found the clause buried in the vendor agreements. The one Ruth had referenced months ago. Patrice read it aloud in a closed-door meeting with the executive team. All compliance renewals are non-delegable and tied to the registered officer on file with the State Transportation and Logistics Authority. Unauthorized access or delegation constitutes breach of contract and voids all active certifications. She looked around the room. Ruth Judge is that officer. No one else. The CFO leaned forward. Can we register someone new? Patrice shook her head. Not in time. The registration process takes weeks. Background checks, federal clearance, bonding requirements. And even if we expedite it, every vendor contract would need to be renegotiated and resigned. The COO spoke up. What about Ruth? Can we bring her back? We can try, Patrice said. But legally, she holds all the leverage. She's not our employee anymore. She's an independent entity with sole authority over our compliance infrastructure. Trent, sitting at the far end of the table, finally understood. She wasn't just the license. She was the system. And he dismantled it with a smile. The email arrived at 3:15. Subject, Consulting Services Inquiry. The body was brief. Ms. Judge, we'd like to discuss the possibility of reinstating your compliance authority on a temporary consulting basis. Please advise your availability. I read it twice. Then I opened a blank reply. I'm happy to assist. My consulting rates are attached. I attached a rate sheet. 6 figures. Flat fee. Payment upfront. No benefits. No guarantees. I hit send. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. I didn't answer. An hour later, another email. Your rate is outside our standard consulting parameters. Can we negotiate? I replied with one sentence. No. Then I blocked their domain and went back to reading. On day 3, regulators arrived. 2 officials from the State Logistics Compliance Board, unannounced, requesting a routine verification audit. Trent tried to stall, citing internal transitions. The lead auditor, a man with wire-rimmed glasses and the emotional range of a granite slab, asked for the compliance logs. Foster pulled them up. Every entry since Ruth's departure read, unauthorized access attempt. The auditor made a note. That's non-compliant. Trent's face drained of color. We're in the process of reassigning authority. The auditor looked up. Reassigning? To whom? Trent didn't have an answer. The auditor handed him a printed form. You have 72 hours to provide proof of authorized compliance oversight, or we'll suspend your operating certifications statewide. He turned and walked out. Trent stood there, holding the paper like a death sentence. Because that's exactly what it was. News spread fast. Internally, the rumor mill churned. Externally, industry contacts started asking questions. By midweek, the company's biggest client, the national retailer, officially suspended their contract. The email was cold, clinical, devastating. Due to unresolved compliance failures, we are exercising our right under Section 18 to halt all shipments pending certification verification. Penalties for non-performance will be assessed per contractual terms. Trent's photo appeared on the internal memo announcing the suspension. His name in bold. The CEO's tone in the accompanying message was sharp. This failure is unacceptable. Leadership will be held accountable. The same words Trent had used on Ruth. Cal forwarded me a screenshot. I read it, sipped my tea, and smiled. My phone rang again. Different number. I answered. Ms. Judge, this is Patrice from Trident. We need to talk. We are talking, I said. We need you back. Name your terms. I leaned back in my chair. I already did. You declined. We'll meet your rate, she said quickly. But we need immediate reinstatement. I'm no longer available for immediate reinstatement, I said. Why not? Because I accepted another position. Silence. Then with who? I smiled. A competitor. They value compliance infrastructure. Patrice's voice tightened. Ruth, please. This company will collapse. Then maybe, I said gently, it should have valued the person holding it together. I hung up. The competitor was Summit Freight, a mid-sized firm with national ambitions and a reputation for stability. Their CEO had reached out a week after my termination, offering a director of compliance role. Double my salary. Remote flexibility. Full control over my department. I'd said I'd think about it. Now, I accepted. The onboarding was smooth. Professional. Respectful. They understood what compliance meant. They knew it wasn't bureaucracy. It was infrastructure. On my first day, Cal texted me. "They're still calling about you." I smiled. Then they finally noticed who kept the lights on. The audit report went public 2 weeks later. State regulators released a summary citing gross operational negligence and unlawful delegation of compliance authority. Trident Logistics was fined. Heavily. Trent's name appeared in bold on page 1. HR quietly deleted old press photos of him from the company website. The CEO announced restructuring. Again. This time, Trent's name wasn't on the org chart. Trent messaged me on LinkedIn. "Ruth, can we talk? I'm consulting now." I stared at the message. Thought about responding. Then typed one sentence. "No need. The system already did the talking." I closed the laptop. 3 months later, I sat in my new office. Sleek. Quiet. My name on the compliance dashboard. Summit Freight systems ran smoothly. Renewals on time. Vendors satisfied. Clients confident. Cal, who'd followed me to Summit, grinned from the doorway. Trident just lost another contract. I didn't look up. Which one? The automotive supplier. Same compliance issues. I nodded. Predictable. The news ticker scrolled across my screen. Trident Logistics loses multi-million-dollar contract amid compliance breach. I read the article. Vendors quoted. Clients interviewed. Regulators explaining the cascading failures. And buried in paragraph 7, a single line. Former compliance officer Ruth Judge now serves as Director of Compliance at Summit Freight. I closed the browser. Trent's career collapsed quietly. No dramatic exit. Just a slow fade. LinkedIn listed him as independent consultant. No clients. No recommendations. Just buzzwords and a profile photo that looked increasingly desperate. I didn't gloat. Didn't celebrate. I just kept working. Renewals. Certifications. Vendor audits. The invisible architecture that kept everything running. Because that's what I did. That's what I'd always done. One evening, I received a voicemail from someone at Trident. A junior analyst. Not Trent. Not HR. Just someone trying to salvage what was left. "Ms. Judge, I know you're not coming back. But if you have any advice, any documentation that might help us rebuild, we'd be grateful." I listened to the message twice. Then I deleted it. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. I'd given them everything. Warnings. Documentation. Solutions. They'd chosen to ignore it. Some lessons can't be taught. They have to be survived. I sat by my window, looking out over the city. The skyline glowed. Traffic moved. Life continued. My phone buzzed. A notification. Summit Freight had just signed a major contract. National reach. Multi-year agreement. The client? The same retailer that abandoned Trident. I exhaled softly, closing my eyes. They called me redundant, I whispered to the empty room. Turns out, I was the system. I opened my laptop, checked the compliance dashboard. All green. Every certification current. Every vendor authorized. Every contract secure. The invisible architecture. Still standing. Because I built it to last. And this time, No one was tearing it down. Thank you for watching this story. If moments like these resonate with you, if you've ever had to choose yourself over people who couldn't see you, then you're not alone. We share stories like this every single day, real accounts of people who found their voice, set their boundaries, and walked into the life they deserved. Subscribe so you never miss the next upload, and share your own story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. I love you all.